Hi. Hello, Isabella Rodriguez. Welcome to the Oklahoma Union's podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Bronte. I am honored to be here today.
So, we know each other.
Yes.
But tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Audience, my name is Isabella Rodriguez, and I am the political director for the Oklahoma AFL-CIO State Federation. Mm-hmm. And so that's, covers the whole state. We've got our two labor councils, OKC and Tulsa. Mm-hmm. And I guess, I got here because I was working at the Capitol already, and it was the summer of 2023 where I first started to hound the legislators that were around me. They were Democratic, so I was on social media a lot, like all young people, and I really picked up on the SAG-AFTRA writers strike, the actor-writer strike.
That was during that time.
So I was all about it. I had never seen anything like that before, except when we had our 2018-2017 teacher walkout, and that was like a national thing, I understand now. But I was so excited about that happening here in Oklahoma that's what made me stay in the state while I was in college. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I don't need to go to DC to work with local governments or making change at the local level. And so since that teacher walkout, the latest thing, it was on a national level that I was like, this is about the people who are truly affected banding together. And so I was asking, I remember Representative Arturo Alonso Sandoval, and he's like one of the younger guys, and I was like, where are your bills about labor? What's going on? Are you seeing this stuff on social media? Come on, get on it. And he's just smiling at me because I didn't know that each state had an AFL, or had an AFL state fed or labor councils and stuff like that. And so all I had seen was, the social media thing. And
right.
Fran Drescher was the president at the time, and I watched The Nanny growing up. So it was a personal connection as well. But seeing her be the leader and speaking for everyone kind of also made me identify with this movement as a whole. So he's smiling at me. And then he's like, well, actually, I've actually been working with the unions here in Oklahoma. And I was just like, wait, where are they? What's going on? How is this so close that I didn't even know about it? And so a couple of months later, President Curry comes up to the office where I was working at the Capitol and was like, a little birdie told me I needed to talk to you. And that was Representative Alonso connecting us because the position for political director had opened up, and Rep. Alonso knew President Curry was looking, and the rest is history. But
I did not know this story.
Yeah,
I didn't know this story.
No, because I was hounding him about it. It was like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
How are you a Democrat and you're not going to have labor bills and worker issues and stuff like that? So that was pretty funny. Not knowing he was obviously endorsed, and the labor unions and Arturo Delgado basically helped him get elected.
Right.
So it's really funny that all these things connected and allowed me to be in this place at this time. But it's also funny too that I have another connection with our union members, because as soon as I got out of college and I was trying to figure out what am I going to do with my life, and like I said, I was inspired by the walkout. I knew I wanted to write public education legislation for the state. And this is before Ryan Walters is on the scene, okay? Right. This is 19, 20, 21. And so because of that, I was looking for a job, and I was like, if I'm going to ever try to write policy about these people, I need to know what their lives are like. So, I ended up being a middle school English teacher at a charter school, not knowing charter schools can't, organize. They had POE there, which is not high quality representation. A workers organization. Sorry if I'm offending anybody, but obviously we have our AFT, American Federations of Teachers, and they were so foundational in that 2017 year. Anyway, so I was learning what it was like for the students of Oklahoma, the parents, and then also educator demands, because a lot of the time people feel like the legislators, elected officials are doing stuff to them without, having robust conversation. And I always thought that was wrong. So get in there, and then I'm teaching one day, and then the next day I'm in the Capitol being an assistant for a representative. So
that's amazing.
I knew it was all supposed to work out that way. They only had less than a month of school left, so I had done my job. I always feel so guilty about leaving the kids before the final day, but they did have only 3 weeks left. So yeah, that's how I got here. I've always been interested in local government and politics since I was in high school, and then I was part of this youth leadership exchange, and I wanted to do that because I knew some of these kids were on the youth city council, and I was like, holy heck, that's up my alley. Why am I not a youth city councilman, or stuff like that?
Didn't even know that existed.
It was hard it still exists, and it's hard to get in because it's competitive, one person per ward and out of the whole ward, so that was intense, and that's how I got onto that. And AP government, of course, was something that I nerded out about, and so I always knew I was going to do something on the local level instead of try to be a congressman or go to DC or something stupid. So, well, it's not stupid, sorry again if I'm offending anybody, but yeah, I really understand that the most change happens at the local level.
Very much so. Okay, so political director of the state AFL-CIO.
Yes.
And for those of you who are wondering, we are the CLC. So what it is you have the national, it's kind of an umbrella of all the internationals, and then you have each state, and then it's not so much underneath, but side.
Yes, lateral.
Lateral is you have, it tends to be major cities or high density of union members or populations. In Oklahoma, we have the one in Oklahoma City, which is the CLC, or the Central Oklahoma Labor Federation, and then we have the Northeastern Oklahoma Labor Council in Tulsa. Okay, political director. What do you do? What happens?
Okay, so my day-to-day, luckily, is not the same thing every day, which I would go a little crazy. Even teachers, used to have the same structure, but you're teaching different lessons. I needed that variety of doing something different during the seasons of the year. So my day-to-day is different, but my seasons are on a 2-year calendar.
Okay.
So if it's an election year, like next year, I'll be busy every single week of the year. But
I'm familiar with that.
Yes, non-election years, I have a little bit more leniency. Maybe I could go on vacation that year. I don't know. But I'm planning a lot of conferences when it's not the months. Actually, the whole year. I'm planning a lot of conferences because the state fed is responsible for providing benefits, or a central place where lots of different kinds of unions can benefit, not just a single one or a certain campaign. So we try to think holistically. Labor management conference is usually always in May, and I encourage everyone to go. And then we do our Young Engaged Labor Leaders Conference in August, and it was such a success. And Bronny was pivotal also to this movement continuing to maintain and grow. But we were able to see, compared to the other southern states who are part of the AFL-CIO nationally, that they aren't making intentional tables for their younger members to feel invested in. And that's something that I didn't realize how proud I was of that until we were comparing ourselves to all these other southern states like Georgia and Florida and all these places that have so much more means and capacity and money and union density than we do. So it just felt really cool that we are making that space, trying to bring up the next generation of leaders in a way that is healthy and constructive, rather than somebody being thrown in or no succession plans. So that was really exciting. We just had that, so busy with that. But then January, so usually December to June, I'm always busy, no matter if it's an election year or not, because the elected officials who work at the state capitol, they are making laws from February to the end of May.
Right.
They spend some time writing those in December, January, and I go through all of them.
So give us a brief overview of what it was. I know it's thousands of bills.
Yes. So even though there's only 149 elected officials, like state representatives and state senators, you've got the governor and other, state things, but they're not the ones who are working through committee processes and, debating about the language of certain bills that will become law. So there's, 150 of them about, and the representatives can have 8, but the senators can write as many proposed laws as they'd like. So even though there's only 150 legislators, every year the number of bills that is filed keeps going up and up and up. So one of my first years, I think it was right around 3,000, and then this past year we saw over 4.
Wow.
Right. So why? Anyway, yes, there's
That's
so many. Yes. Once we get closer, I'll do a breakdown later. But so I'll read, their ideas, proposals. They'll file it, and it'll say, this. And I don't have the words yet, but this is my idea.
Right.
And so I'll categorize those with the president of the AFL-CIO, and we'll follow them through the whole process from January to the end of May, because that's the only time frame that the legislators are given to pass those laws. So it's kind of good and bad. Other states in the country have year-long sessions, so there's more time for them to debate, more time for laws to be passed. But in our state, I'm kind of grateful that it's not longer. Because it is a really fast process, and it is grueling, and it is political. So there's all kinds of shots fired all the time, quote unquote, if you will. So yeah, that is pretty intense. And then the AFL State Fed, last year, out of those 4,000, I think it was like 4,100 bills filed, we were tracking almost like at least 550, almost closer to 600. And then from that 600, roughly, from February to May, it only, out of that 600, I guess, only 80 to 90 of the ones we cared about made it into law signed by the governor, or, they did a lot of veto overrides this year, and so it got passed into law. So going from, 600 to less than 100 is always a whirlwind, for sure. So
you're busy. I know. You're hard to get a hold of during those months.
I'm very sorry.
No, that's okay. You're busy. I know that.
I'm up at the Capitol and trying to...
So we are in a red state. We're a red trifecta. We got Republican governor, Republican held Senate and House. How do you work on those relationships? Because we're not Democrat, but we have Democratic leaning principles such as the right to a break when it's 100-degree weather, and the right for benefits, and XYZ. So how do you work with those relationships?
It's interesting you ask that. I think that my favorite thing about the labor movement and workers' rights in general is that no matter who you are, you have somebody in your life who is touched by, a laborious job or, works for a living. No matter what, you can't escape that.
Right.
And bringing that down to every single human has somebody they know that's working for a living kind of brings it to a personal level no matter what. So even though big labor, quote unquote, whatever that is, DC politics, national politics and stuff, that's different than what I think we are, because we don't have, the millions of dollars like the DC and congressional stuff. So even though we are in a red state, a lot of our Republican registered elected officials, as well as our union members, 60% of Oklahoma's union members are registered Republicans. So it's not necessarily, how do we convince them to be Democrats at all. Like you said, we're nonpartisan. I just want to kind of bring that back to our essence, which is, everybody who's working deserves to get, paid for their work and have decent and healthy work environment, safety precautions, etc. So the things that we fight for legislatively are not outrageous. Right. That's my favorite thing, is like, we are not in the sensational ideas. We are in the real stuff that if it were implemented or rolled back upon, that would have serious impacts on everyday Americans. Yes. So even though we aren't a red state and labor is usually associated with the mob, I was trying to think of, the mafia is the mob, right?
Thereabouts. I want to say mafia is Italian and mob is Irish. Let's go with
Oh
that.
my gosh. Okay, yeah. I was like, I knew there's a distinction, but
Somebody's gonna get mad that I said that.
I hope. Okay, yeah. Again, sorry to offend if we do, but when I was at my first fundraiser for some politicians, they were Republican, and it was supposed to be this labor fundraiser.
Yeah.
You know, we have some of our locals that have a lot better relationships with their conservative politicians, which I think is a benefit no matter what. So when we got there, and I'm just chatting people and getting to know some of the people in the room, and they're like, yeah, it's really nice to hear that you guys aren't like in the mafia or mobsters and stuff. And I'm just like politely laughing like because I didn't know what they were talking about.
Right.
But these stereotypes from the East Coast kind of even put us in a bad light, even though we are in Oklahoma.
Right.
All of the unions here in the state were created by Oklahomans who believe what we believe now. There's not much variation. It's just the idea of like the outsiders coming in, and
Right.
we don't have a huge mob problem in Oklahoma, so I don't think that it's fair to...
Yeah, unions have a bad rap.
Yeah.
Because my best friend, he lives in Texas, and his father's a plumber. And when I told him I was working for the unions, he was like, what? Why? Because to him, unions is a bad name.
Yes.
In certain areas, and I think that's part of our job as like this upcoming young labor that we need to help reform the union name.
Yeah, the stereotypes is bad.
But I also agree. I want to point out to your point. I know I brought it up about the nonpartisan, but I think that's something that I feel like our members, our audience, really need to understand. We are not in the business of D's and R's.
No.
We are in the business of the working family agenda, of how can we improve your life so you can go and work your job, come home to your wife and child, or, if you're a woman working, come back, to whoever, and just live an honest, decent, wholesome life as an Oklahoman. Yeah. And that's what we're here about. Really.
Absolutely. I know, I was about to say so many. I know multiple. I wouldn't go as far as say all of the Republicans in the legislature are like really great, decent human beings who would understand or sit down at the table with them. Not all, but I think a lot of them. Right. And so I would love to change that dynamic as well, that rap that some of the Republicans might get too, because working issues really get to be nonpartisan in a lot of rooms at the Capitol that, say, sensational things you see on the news don't.
Right, like licensing is an issue for workers, and breaks, like I mentioned, is an issue for workers, and I know even apprentice issues, because wasn't there a bill recently about how many apprentices can be on a job site? And
the ratio,
things like that. And so, okay, well, I'm glad that that you're helping me in this movement and helping the Oklahomans in this movement.
We're trying. I think you and me bringing like a more broad perspective, and we're trying to personally and professionally bring as many people as we can into the fold, because we know it's the right way, but it's the most beneficial movement you can join, in my opinion.
So was there anything recently that you've worked on that you wanted to kind of like highlight and draw and say?
The last thing I'll leave you guys with is something that also is coming up in the next year. When I was first able to see kind of like the multiple unions, like not just a certain group, like the building and trades or industrial public employees. It was like cross-union solidarity, engagement, activity, joining together, communicating, was around State Question 832, the minimum wage. Not, we're not a monolith. There's lots of variation in our membership, but I was really impressed to see how many different locals, how many different international unions were willing to offer up resources, extra time, volunteering, phone banking, etc., to get this minimum wage question on the ballot. And so that was last year, and the governor has the ability to choose the ballot date, so he allowed June 2026, so almost 2 years later. And so now that, we're halfway through, it's next June, but I would really like people to keep that in mind, that, yes, unions fight for a minimum, of working living wage for all their members, but we have the opportunity now to join together as all unions to fight for all Oklahomans to have a living wage.
That's
so,
a good point. That's a good point.
June 13th or June 16th, 2026 is the vote. So, we're looking out for that.
Yeah, we're going to be pressing on that. I know. We're going to be sending lots
emails
of stuff
coming soon.
Emails coming
flyers,
soon.
parties.
I'm sure we're going to have lots of demonstrations about it.
I'm sure. I hope. Yeah. But yeah, thanks for having me on, and I hope to be back.
Definitely, we'll be bringing you back multiple times, I'm sure.
All right.
You're a vast well of knowledge.
Well, thank you very much. I try.
Okay, so as you know, on the Oklahoma Unions podcast, I say as you know, we talk all the time. Yeah. Anyways, we asked the guests to title this episode.
Okay. Really? I should have thought. I did know. I should have thought about this earlier. I don't know, but my origin story could be titled Instagram Reels to Political Director or something social media to state fed, something like that. Because I was really pulled into the fray by, the social media stuff that was happening in California and New York. And so we'll see.
One last thing.
Yes.
What's your final message? If you had a message. Union members, non-union members, young workers rising up.
We have more power together than the people who are currently in power. So,
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming on the Oklahoma Unions podcast.
Of course. See y'all soon.
See y'all soon. Bye.